Welcome to Stories of History. I'm Virgil, your guide through the murky depths of the past. Today we're setting sail on a journey that takes us from the real-life horrors of a 19th century whaling disaster to the heart of some enduring myths and legends. And believe me, you're going to want to hold on tight because this deep dive is going to take us through some pretty choppy waters. Our story begins with the Essex, a whaling ship from Nantucket that met a rather unfortunate end in the vast expanse of the Pacific Ocean back in 1820. Now, I know what you're thinking, another shipwreck story, but this one, my friend, is different. This isn't just about a ship going down. It's about a whale, a massive sperm whale that decided to take matters into its own. Whale flippers. This real-life encounter with a vengeful whale, as you might have guessed, became the inspiration for one of the most iconic seafaring novels ever written, Herman Melville's Moby Dick. But the story of the Essex and the monster that sank it goes far beyond literary inspiration. It reveals a lot about how we humans perceive and create monsters both in the natural world and in our own minds. So let's set the scene. It's November 1820, and the Essex is thousands of miles from home hunting whales in the Pacific. They'd been at sea for over a year, braving storms, chasing their prey, and living a life that was as harsh as it was exhilarating. They were having decent luck off the coast of Peru, but then, like many a tragedy, ambition got the better of them. They decided to push further out into the open ocean, into uncharted waters in search of even bigger catches, and that's where they encountered it, a pod of sperm whales led by a monstrous male estimated to be over 85 feet long. Now, sperm whales were known to be formidable creatures, but this leviathan was something else entirely. When the Essex lowered their whaling boats and harpooned some of the whales in the pod, this giant decided he'd had enough. He rammed the Essex, not once, but twice, smashing the wooden hull with a force that sent shockwaves through the entire ship. Imagine the terror, the sheer disbelief of those sailors as their world was literally turned upside down by this creature they had so drastically underestimated. The Essex, once a symbol of human ambition and ingenuity, was now nothing more than splintered wood and shattered dreams sinking beneath the waves. 21 men found themselves adrift in 3 small whaleboats, thousands of miles from land, with meager supplies and the haunting memory of the monster that had brought them to this desperate situation. Their ordeal, my friend, had only just begun. They managed to salvage some food, water, navigational instruments, and even a couple of pigs that had somehow survived the sinking. But it was a drop in the ocean compared to what they needed to survive a journey of this magnitude. Faced with this daunting task, the men argued over which direction to sail. Some wanted to head towards the Marquesas Islands, deep in the Pacific, gambling on a quicker route to land. Others more consciously favored the longer but potentially safer route towards the South American mainland. Ultimately, they chose the mainland, but as you can imagine, their journey was anything but safe. After weeks at sea, their supplies dwindled, their thirst intensified, and they found themselves on a tiny, desolate island that offered little more than temporary respite. Even the few seagulls that lived there weren't enough to sustain 21 men. 3 decided to stay on the island hoping for rescue, while the rest, driven by desperation, pressed on in their 2 remaining whaleboats. And that's when things took a turn for the truly horrifying Kwa. As their situation grew increasingly desperate, starvation and dehydration gnawing at their bodies and minds, they resorted to the unthinkable. They began consuming the bodies of those who perished, driven by primal instinct to survive, a choice born of the most unimaginable despair. Now, it's important to remember that these weren't mindless savages. Even in their desperation, there was a chilling order to their actions. The fact that they waited for a black crew member to die before resorting to cannibalism reveals the deeply ingrained prejudices of the time, a tragic reminder that even in the face of death, societal hierarchies and biases persisted. Of the 3 whaleboats, 1 disappeared without a trace, lost to the vastness of the Pacific, its fate a haunting mystery. In the other 2, the horrifying reality of survival unfolded. They resorted to drawing lots to determine who would be sacrificed to feed the others, a gruesome ritual that speaks volumes about the extremes to which human beings can be pushed when faced with their own mortality. Imagine, if you can, the psychological toll of such an experience. To be forced to make those kinds of decisions, to see your fellow human beings, your shipmates, reduced to sustenance. It's a darkness that most of us thankfully will never comprehend. 3 months after the whale sank, the Essex, 2 ships finally stumbled upon the remaining 2 boats. 5 men, utterly delirious, their bodies ravaged by starvation, and their minds shattered by the horrors they had endured, were all that remained of the original crew. They were found gnawing on the bones of their companions, a scene that would forever be etched into the annals of maritime history. The 3 who had stayed on the island, Henderson Island as it's called, actually had the best outcome, relatively speaking. They survived on a diet of seagulls and whatever else they could scavenge until they were rescued 2 months later. Out of the 21 men who set sail on the Essex, only 8 survived. One of them, the first mate, Owen Chase, went on to write a chilling account of their harrowing experience, a narrative that would become a key inspiration for Herman Melville's Moby Dick. But the story of the vengeful white whale doesn't end there. Melville was also influenced by another tale, Moby Dick, or the White Whale of the Pacific, written by Jeremiah N. Reynolds and published 20 years after the Essex met its watery grave. Melville, it seems, was a master weaver of tales, blending elements from real-life encounters, existing literature, and his own fertile imagination to create a literary tapestry that would capture the imaginations of readers for generations to come. But let's not forget the real-life consequences of these events, the human cost of this clash between man and nature. Owen Chase, the first mate who survived the Essex, was deeply traumatized by the experience. He reportedly developed a kind of hoarding disorder, obsessively stockpiling food in his attic. Some historians believe this was a haunting reminder of the starvation he endured at sea, a manifestation of the trauma that lingered long after he had escaped the clutches of the Pacific. It's a stark reminder that the wounds inflicted by such events go far beyond the physical. They leave scars on the psyche, shaping behaviors and haunting memories for years to come. And then there's the impact on the perception of whales themselves. For centuries, whales were demonized, portrayed as monstrous killers lurking in the depths. But how much of that perception was rooted in reality, and how much was shaped by stories by literature that painted them as the villains of the deep? The irony, of course, is that those whales were just defending themselves, protecting their own. They were demonized for simply existing in a world that sought to exploit them, a world that saw them as nothing more than commodities to be hunted and harvested. It took centuries, and the plight of creatures like Keiko the orca, who starred in the film Free Willy, for us to begin to understand the need to protect these magnificent creatures, to see them not as monsters, but as fellow inhabitants of this planet, deserving of our respect and protection. It's a stark reminder of how easily misinformation can spread, how stories, whether rooted in reality or pure fabrication, can shape our beliefs and actions. The sailors of the Essex set sail with a very specific image of whales in their minds. They were prey resources to be exploited. They never stopped to consider the possibility that a whale might fight back, might see them as the threat. And in doing so, they paid a terrible price. Join me next time for another journey through stories of history. Until then, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep those lanterns burning bright.